will be away from my cave for 9 days. Reason for your absence: attending a family wedding. Oh, greetings, my friends, and welcome back to Stark Raving. I am your host, Lord Stark. It may surprise some of you to know that the Brotherhood without banners, indeed many of the Brotherhoods of the Damned in Westeros, thrive on a large amount of paperwork. How the Brotherhood operates is just one of the things we'll be looking at on today's episode, which I call Kissed by Fire. Let's start by checking in on Robb Stark's camp.
The captured Lannister boys hear fighting. A moment later, Rickard Karstark and his men burst in and kill them. Their corpses laid out before Talisa and Robb. Rickard and his men are brought in. Robb says this was treason, but Karstark claims this was vengeance for his dead son. He says Robb failed to punish his mother for letting Jaime Lannister go free. Robb has Karstark jailed and his men hung. His family advises him to keep quiet about this, to hold Karstark hostage until the war ends in order to ensure that his forces cooperate with Robb.
I fought Joffrey for you, and it won't save you now.
I don't want it to save me. I wanted to haunt you to the end of your days.
Robb beheads Lord Karstark. He knows his army is now undermanned and unfocused, but while talking to his wife, he realizes that he can take the Lannister home of Casterly Rock, but only if he gets men to replace Karstark's forces, and the only one with the numbers is the man he scorned by marrying Talisa, Walder Frey.
I feel bad for a nephew, Robb, but honestly, if I were forming an army, I'm not sure I'd miss the Karstarks if they left. I won't speak ill of the dead, I'll just say I've yet to meet a Karstark who didn't smell vaguely of asparagus. It's weird. Let's cast our eyes north on Jon Snow.
Jon is interrogated about the wall by Mance's advanced team. He claims 1,000 men man Castle Black, and though Ygritte backs him up, the others doubt him. Ygritte steals his sword and lures him into a cave where warm springs feed a pond. She strips off and teases him about breaking his vows. Moments later, the pair are making love in the cave. Later, they discuss Ygritte's previous lovers before hopping into the pool for a proper bath.
P.S. While considering this time-off application, if you could forward me the rules of the Brotherhood regarding fraternization with the opposite sex, I'd be grateful. Speaking of things you can only do with one hand, let's check in with Jaime Lannister.
Brienne and Jaime are brought before Roose Bolton. He immediately has them untied and given suitable quarters. Jaime asks of the capital, and though he toys with him a bit, Roose tells him that Stannis' invasion failed, and his family as well. Later, he's taken before Qyburn, the former maester of House Bolton, who was stripped of his chains for experiments that were too bold. Jaime stops him from amputating the arm and gets him to painfully remove the corruption and rotting flesh of his maimed wrist. Later, Jaime joins Brienne in the baths, specifically hers, mostly to annoy her. He implies that his own maiming and Renly's death make her a poor bodyguard. Jaime apologizes for the insult and she sits. He recognizes her look as one of despisal. No one has trusted him since he broke his oath and killed the Mad King. Jaime tells how the Mad King burned half his court for his own amusement, how he mined the city with wildfire. Tywin brought his armies to King's Landing to protect the king, even though Jaime saw through it and advised the king not to allow him in. Once in, Tywin sacked the city and the king decided to burn it down. Jaime killed him in order to save his family and the lives of the citizenry of King's Landing.
If this is true, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell Lord Stark?
Yes, why didn't you tell me? Oh.
Finally spent from his storytelling, Jaime passes out.
The Kingslayer!
Jaime. My name's Jaime.
It hurts when people don't trust you, doesn't it, Jaime? We go now to the south, to the camps of Daenerys Targaryen.
Sir Barristan is tired of serving lunatics and bad kings. He wants to serve someone he believes in and asks if Jorah believes in Dany. Dany asks the Unsullied officers if they've chosen a leader. A young soldier steps forward and introduces himself as Grey Worm.
All Unsullied boys are given new names when they are cut. Red Flea, Black Rat. Names that remind them what they are. Vermin.
She asks if he wants a better name, but for him there is no better name. It's the name he had when he met Dany and was set free. Jorah learns that Selmy knew Robert Baratheon wanted Daenerys dead, But the former Kingsguard seems to know nothing of Mormont's role in all that. Ser Jorah is told that his reputation in Westeros is more or less mud, and his presence might hurt Dany's attempts to retake the throne.
Alright, so Daenerys decides to become Queen of Westeros. Do the people accept her? On the one hand, she's got a former slaver as her advisor. On the other hand, she's got a bloody huge army of killing machines and 3 fire-breathing dragons. Welcome aboard, Khaleesi. Let's check in on King's Landing with its who's-its and what's-its. Look, you try finding original ways to say let's go check in on King's Landing every week, okay? Can it be done?
Tyrion meets with Lady Olenna. He points out that the wedding is overly expensive while they're at war. She, in turn, rattles off a list of contributions that the Tyrells have made to the Lannisters' armies. A royal wedding will be good for morale and distract the people, something Tyrion can't argue.
I was told you were drunk, impertinent, and thoroughly debauched. You can imagine my disappointment at finding nothing but a browbeaten bookkeeper.
She quickly offers to pay for half the wedding and leaves. Elsewhere, Cersei approaches Peter Baelish and asks him for proof of House Tyrell's poor intentions towards her family. Later, Sansa and Marjorie watch Loras duel. He meets a new squire, Oliver, and the duo quickly end up in bed. Later, Oliver meets with Lord Baelish, who tells him that Loras is planning to marry Sansa. He then meets with Sansa, and she tells him that she's reconsidered leaving the city with him. Tyrion goes to meet his father and finds Cersei waiting for him as well. Having learned of the Tyrells' intentions towards Sansa, Tywin won't stand for losing the key to Winterfell. He plans to marry her to Tyrion.
And it is past time you were wed.
I was wed. Oh, don't you remember?
Cersei's enjoyment at Tyrion's misfortune is brief when Tywin orders her to marry Loras, and thus sew up their control of Westeros.
Seems like there's a lot of weddings these days, although I doubt I'll be invited to any ones thrown by the Lannisters. My problems with the Lannisters are many. For instance, I once piddled on Lord Tyrion. He was already drunk outside the pub when I staggered out. I was looking for a John. I thought he was a lawn gnome. I've got to stop telling you these stories at dinner reflect well on me. Let's go over to Dragonstone and see what's happening there.
At Dragonstone, Stannis goes to visit his wife, Queen Selyse. There, he tries to confess about his affair with Melisandre, but Selyse tells him that Melisandre already told her. She's happy for him. Happy that Melisandre was able to bear him a son when she never could. He then goes to see his daughter, the Princess Shireen. She's suffering from some sort of degenerative disease that has turned the skin on half her face into scales. She asks about her friend, the Onion Knight, and Stannis tells her that Davos is a traitor to the realm. Later, she sneaks into the dungeons to visit him. She brings him a book to help him pass the time, but he tells her he can't read. No problem, she'll teach him how to read.
You warn these women about drinking the water of life while pregnant? Do they listen? No. Then their daughter's born half sandworm, their sons are stillborn monstrosities, and they're absolute loonies. But do not listen to me! Let's check in with someone who does have a good head on her shoulders. Arya Stark.
Thoros prays to the Lord of Light that, through trial by combat, they will discover if Sandor Clegane is guilty. Beric's sword lights on fire, unnerving the Hound. It's an absolutely brutal sword fight, with the Hound at one point cutting off his own shield when it's caught on fire. It ends with him cutting through Beric's sword and cleaving the brother in two. Thoros immediately begins praying.
Lord, Arya, don't!
The trial is over and Clegane is declared innocent by a now living Beric. They release the Hound against Arya's protests. Later, Gendry tells Arya that he's decided to stay in Smith for the Brotherhood. Arya tries to convince him to join Robb's army, but Gendry is tired of serving lords.
They're a family. I've never had a family.
I can be your family.
That night, Arya runs through her list of names. Thoros tells her they'll return her to Robb in exchange for funds to keep operating. Beric explains that Thoros has brought him back to life 6 times, but the resurrections are eroding Beric's essence. Arya asks if he could resurrect a beheaded man, but Thoros is doubtful.
I would never wish my life upon him.
I would. You're alive.
Aye, that's the best thing about working with the Brotherhood without banners. best healthcare in all of Westeros. Well, another episode has come and gone, but what did I think of it? Let's take a closer look at Kissed by Fire.
I will say that the sword fight between Beric and the Hound was probably one of the most intense fights we've had to date. Also, Arya's goodbye to Gendry really tugged at my heartstrings. She's lost so many, and she doesn't want to lose this person who's become very important to her. But there's a sort of resignation to it that works with the character. She keeps losing the people she loves, and it's taking a toll on Arya. Robb Stark, who frankly has never been my favorite character, really stepped up his game here. The Karstarks want blood, and they murdered 2 innocent children to get it. The logical thing would be to keep Rickard alive, but Robb proves he's his father's son and does what honor demands of him. Much of the rest of the episode felt necessary, but also came off as a bit pointless. Jon and Ygritte needed to grow closer, so they sleep together. Important for the characters, but ultimately it didn't really do much for the story of this episode. Most of Dragonstone was also pointless. The introduction of Stannis' crazy wife and his deformed daughter also seemed to serve no point, except so we can have someone teach Davos how to read. The parts in the capital were also overly tame, Oliver and Loras notwithstanding. I really expected more from the Tyrion and Olenna scenes. Diana Rigg was great, but she was right about Tyrion. He's a browbeating bookkeeper by this point. Peter Dinklage was just not given much to do in that scene, though he makes up for it a bit at the end where he and his father butt heads over his first marriage. It was also nice to see Cersei's schadenfreude blow up in her face. Seeing her suddenly become pathetic and beg not to be forced into a second loveless marriage was a new side of the character and was sadly played all too briefly. Dany's scenes were also pointless. We're obviously catching our breath after the excitement of the last episode. It was nice to explore Jorah and Mormont's relationship, but I do know that nothing ultimately comes of Selmy's warnings to Mormont, at least in Season 3. Another positive note was Jaime finally coming to life in this episode, fighting desperately to maintain his dignity during the surgery and then sparring with Brienne. The relationship continues its evolution past antagonism when he apologizes to her. We also get a long-awaited look into his head when he explains why he became the Kingslayer and just how much that decision cost him.
Sadly, I felt like most of this episode was unimportant fluff. There were a few strong moments, but not enough to carry it as a whole. I give Kissed by Fire
Do you have running?
2 kingly bitch slaps out of 5. Today's question about life in Westeros comes to us from Glowering the Gold. He writes, how many Brotherhood of the Damned are there in Westeros? What are their names, and what are their purposes? Well, Glowering, no one is sure of the exact number. You've got the long-standing traditional brotherhoods like the Night's Watch. You've got some newer, lesser-known ones that people may consider a flash of the pan, like the Brotherhood without banners, but I think these kids have a cracking good shot at being a long-term Brotherhood of the Damned. And then you've got some of the newer brotherhoods that people aren't aware of on the mainland yet, like the Unsullied down in Essos. We believe there are about anywhere between 2 and 3 dozen Brotherhoods of the Damned operating in Westeros at any time. Membership varies. I mean, there are about 1,000 of us in the Night's Watch. There are about 3 in Lord Sully's Dry Men of the Tavern. That's Sully and his 2 buddies who get tossed out whenever they run out of money. They start singing in harmony to earn more coins to go back into the tavern and buy more ale. I wouldn't exactly call them a Brotherhood of the Damned, but then I don't get to name these things. If you've got a question about life in Westeros, ask it in the comments section below. I'll choose one to read and answer on next week's show. Until then, I am Lord Stark, and this is Stark Raving!